Dr. Talicia Williams, an associate professor at Harvey-Mudd College, gave a great TED Talk on the power of data. She says that as a kid, she loved information that she could get from data and the stories that could be told with numbers. In the next 5 minutes, I will share with you who NPD is, how and what data we collect, and then Michael will join in to share the stories he puts together from those numbers he gets from our data. At any point during the presentation, please type any questions in the chat. We will wait until the end to answer them. Oh, by the way, this is Margarita Kramer, an account executive at the NPD Group. Mike Diamond is our B2B technology industry analyst and a 17-year veteran with Ingram Micro prior to joining NPD. We thank you for sharing the next 30 minutes with us. So, who is the NPD Group? The NPD Group is a privately held company. We are headquartered in New York. We have over 1,300 employees worldwide. And actually, this coming September is our 50th anniversary. And I hear there's a big celebration in the works. So what do? We track and monitor point-of-sales transactions in 14 different industries. Mike and I are in the technology business unit. In the technology area, we monitor manufacturers like yourself, Cisco, HP, Lexmark, F5, as they move their products through the distribution channel. So you may wonder, how do we do that? NPD partners with the top retailers, distributors, and resellers, and VARs. We have a very unique methodology. We have built great partnerships with the biggest resellers and biggest distributors in the industry. They provide us with their SKU level sales across all categories on a weekly basis. We aggregate that information, provide them a view of themselves versus the rest of the market. This partnership allows the resellers and distributors to understand key trends that can help make sure they are getting their fair share of the market. For manufacturers like yourselves, we develop solutions that allow you to look at manufacturer sales for the category, by brand, by item, or SKU. Manufacturers can see key price and product shifts and make adjustments to ensure they are being competitive. NPD actually is a critical tool in ensuring our industry is building the right product at the right price for the right customer to drive growth. You, as a manufacturer, cannot see individual reseller or distributor sales. You will always see an aggregate of the market. We have three distinct markets: the distributor, the reseller, and the VARs. And I will quickly touch on them on the next slide before turning it over to Michael. So these are the lists of which distributors and resellers participate in our panel. With our panel, we cover about 85% with the distributor track and 90% with the reseller track. Our VAR tracking service brings a lot of insights, particularly with the invoice level service that can assist you if you are challenged selling to the SMB market. Maybe you want to know what SKUs are attached to your products or your competitors, and that is the type of information you may find in the VAR invoice service. Well, with that, I leave you with Mike Diamond. He's busy traveling most of the time, working with customers and the channels. So it is nice to see, it is nice to have him with us for the next 15, 20 minutes.
Thank you, Margarita. I appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for joining the call. As Margarita said, I was at Ingram Micro for about 17 years in strategic planning and market intelligence. And we used to analyze the markets, the vendors, their strategies, and vertical markets and whatnot. So we're going to talk about, in the next few minutes, we're going to talk about the overall United States B2B market from an annual growth perspective. We're also going to talk about what we saw in Q1 2015 versus Q1 2016. And then we have some market spotlights on video conferencing, hyper-converged infrastructure, and the server market. So let's shoot away. So over the last 3 years, from 2013 to 2015, we saw the overall market grow from $66.9 billion to about $72 billion, or a 3.7% compound annual growth rate, which did exceed U.S. GDP growth. Again, where this data is coming from, this is total channel, so we are taking all the data from our distribution partners and taking data from our reseller partners, e.g., folks like CDW, Insight, and whatnot. So this is a pretty good, accurate viewpoint of the overall B2B market. So areas of growth. So if we looked at the previous numbers, we kind of highlighted key areas of growth. If we look at all the categories that are being sold in the market, each one of them has kind of a high-level trend that they fall under. So the areas of growth that we saw in the market were really the underlying infrastructure to support public and private clouds for organizations, or leading into the software-defined data center. We saw a lot of growth in software from folks like VMware. We saw a lot of infrastructure in the back end to kind of make that work. Other categories that we saw growth in were growth in Wi-Fi. A lot of organizations are adding more access points to their organizations, whether it's in a retail storefront, whether it's in a commercial market, a regular commercial company. They're adding more access points for people to log into. A lot of people share spaces. There's a lot of remote workers, but then they're also collapsing in things like mobile device management. So folks that are on the road, if, let's say, if their phone is stolen, companies want the ability to shut down that phone to secure information. So those are areas that we also saw growth. We also saw growth of pro audio video categories in markets such as retail. Again, those markets have been pressured from larger .coms. So they're trying to thwart the showrooming activity. So people will typically go to a retail storefront. They'll look online for the products, and then they'll buy them online. So they'll test the product out. So they're trying to make the experiences more interactive, more customer service oriented, and attracting people into those markets. And then another area of growth is cybersecurity. Everybody's been watching what's been happening to key companies out there. They're under attack from foreign governments. They're under attack via organized crime. So it's not just foreign governments, but it's also making sure and sensing what people are touching, what data they have access to, and how to access it from the mobile endpoint to inside the perimeter. And then where do we think growth is going to come from? If we look at where companies are heading today, we look at all the categories in cybersecurity. And cybersecurity, we think we're seeing a lot of resellers and folks starting information management strategies, which would be under umbrella of remote database management systems, data information, data quality tools, analytics, visualization, and cybersecurity. So a lot of companies are taking information off their mainframe, and they're trying to make sense of it, make it more useful for employees, and trying to add more up and cross-sell activity for marketing and sales, and then really securing it. Excuse me. So that's something that we expect to continue, and the major players in the industry are also making acquisitions to kind of center on that market. Another thing we're seeing is acceleration of integrated systems, again, based on Evo Rails. So, we're seeing a lot of hyper-converged activity, and we expect that to continue. A lot of your smaller offices want the ability to set up a private cloud and have backup. So a lot of small businesses have remote backups to larger hyperscale providers such as an Amazon, but they want the ability to get the same type of capability that a larger organization has, where they have converged infrastructure, things like FlexPod or vBlock. An area that we are seeing growth, and we expect to see it more, is growth of components. A lot of your system integrators are building systems based on the Open Compute standard, which is basically your bigger hyperscale providers are designing systems for folks like Facebook, Rackspace, Microsoft, and it's kind of a race to the bottom. Those products are lower margin, but that market is growing fast, so we are seeing component growth in there. Another area we're seeing growth in is enhanced networking upgrades, and we will see more of that as more people are remote working. We're seeing companies trying to organize a labor pool and get them to communicate more. A lot of companies have stretched out operations, whether it's in manufacturing where they have R&D in one market in one state, but then they might have the marketing or sales in the other market. So communicating back and forth and making sure that everybody's kind of collaborating, communicating properly. That's another area of the market that we see that's going to come in the future. So now we're going to talk about what we saw in Q1 2015 versus Q1 2016. We're using a mixture of our NPD quarterly SMB survey and our distributor and reseller tracking services. So the next few slides will actually be touching on both of those. So this is our SMB survey. This was intent to purchase in Q1 2016, so before we actually saw sales data. You could see that, overall spending intentions declined by -8% from the last year and 1% versus the last quarter. So it looked kind of grim. Things were pretty much down. People are worried about the economy. One of the standouts was networking. Again, companies are trying to save CapEx or capital expenditures, so they're not buying as many buildings, but they're letting people work from home. So, more access points, more telephony gear and whatnot. So that's something that we expect to continue. But if we look at that survey and we look at the actual results that we saw in our reseller and distributor panel, you can see in Q1 2015, we did about $13.2 billion. And then in Q1 2016, we did about $12.6 billion, or we lost about $550 million, or -4%. So if we look back at our survey, it was a pretty good indicator that the market was going to come down a little bit. So if you look at the distributors and the resellers in our panel, vendors typically use them to reach the fragmented SMB market. So if we're looking at the smaller resellers or smaller businesses, we think that our panel is actually a very good proxy for what's happening in the SMB market. So when we saw this, we actually realized that, we probably will have a drop. So if we look at the overall market again, we did see, pretty steep decline. And, people are worried about the economy. And I think that, companies start getting into defensive mode. So if we look at the top of our top 10 categories, 7 out of 10 decline, or a -5%, or a $255 million loss. The biggest category of our markets was laser toner. And when you have a downturn in the economy, laser toner, the decline in laser toner made sense, because when you typically go into, the economy gets people get kind of worried about it. Expectations, finance teams start looking at their operating expenses and start going from the bottom up. So areas such as supplies and accessories, or utilities, or travel and entertainment, companies, what they start doing is they start, pulling back and starting to save on those operating costs to make sure that their operating margins are okay. So, typically, laser toner and things like that will be the first things that you start seeing a pullback on the market. You'll also see things such as capital expenditures, such as things like PCs and servers and whatnot. And then if the economy, continues to decline, then at the very top of your operating expenses would be, wages and salaries, and that's where you start getting into production and workforces. A lot of companies, we have seen that in the IT market, and we have seen it in other parts of the market in different verticals. But again, there is a direct correlation between what's happening in the economy and what people are pruning. So now we're going to talk about the market spotlights. Video conferencing, we picked markets that, we know are going to continue to grow and that organizations are really looking to kind of ramp up again. We talked about more firms stretching out their operation from a global perspective. So again, there's a lot of manufacturing firms that actually outsource, their manufacturing to China or Japan or Korea or even Vietnam. So a lot of times those meetings are video conferencing. So your design engineers and your CAD/CAM specialists will actually have those meetings overseas. More companies are becoming global. So again, that's also saving on travel and entertainment. And then if you look at the verticals within that, the fastest growth verticals are really healthcare, education, manufacturing, government. There's a duplicate of education there. But as the market continues to fuse, we see kind of a continued blurring between unified communications, collaboration, and video conferencing. So companies such as Microsoft and others are really trying to, strengthen the mobility aspect of video conferencing and, again, helping organizations map out their employee base, making sure they're communicating, they're responsive, and then tracking, things they're doing, making it more productive. So if you look at 2015, the video conferencing market, if you look at each column represents each vendor. So if we look at the market share, you can see that Cisco had the lion's share of the market from a revenue perspective with their SX80, which are for large meetings, their SX20 for smaller meetings. They clearly, that was a big chunk of their market. And if you look at life-size communications, you can see that their 600 series, that's for large meetings, and then for Logitech's, their 300 series E, that was a big chunk of the market as well. So, one of the things that we are seeing in the video conferencing market is, many do specialize in boardrooms, many specialize in, training centers, but, we think areas that are going to continue to grow are, huddle rooms, break rooms, but also as, the markets become more saturated, we're going to see more pocket verticals that are going to be growing. So, we're going to see, the video conferencing at the desktop more, connecting that with a WebEx or OmniJoin, but we expect that to continue. And then if you look at this chart, if you look at the y-axis, this is 2014 to 2015 growth. So the higher it is, the higher growth it had. And if you look at the horizontal axis, that's the more market share the vendor had. And the bigger the bubble, the greater the market share too, which is a representation of that. So you can see that Cisco, from a revenue perspective, was growing the fastest and also had the majority of revenue. So the market grew from about 128 million to about 148, or a 16% year growth rate. We expect that market to continue growing. And again, we saw Mitel recently acquire Polycom. So, we expect more M&A activity in that market. So we expect it to be a hot market in the next 2 to 3 years to come. Another area we're looking at is hyperconverged infrastructure. So, a lot of our partners are asking about it. If we look at the overall market, we saw hyper growth. So we saw north of triple-digit growth. And again, that's going to accelerate. A lot of companies today, smaller businesses want solutions that kind of mimic what, again, the converged infrastructure from your FlexPods or your vBlocks. So this is really resonating in remote branch offices. Companies want to save OpEx on, if they have multiple IT guys, they can collapse it down to maybe 1 or 2, and they can manage, the entire operation of the data center with a single pane of glass. So that's something that's very attractive to smaller businesses. A lot of companies want to spin up virtual machines with the push of a button. And, for those firms that actually want to have a disaster recovery plan, they can also, connect via an API to someone like an Amazon for a backup strategy. So it's a very, it's a very fast growth market, and it should impact other storage and server markets as you collapse the compute, the networking, and the storage mode in one box. So this is something that's going to continue. If we look at the market leaders, you can see that Nutanix, their NX3000 series, was the leader of their market, and you can see Scale Computing, Supermicro, which had a little bit of share, and then HP. They're coming out with new offerings with the 2015, but again, people are starting to really embrace the market, and whether they're building on reference architecture or they're coming up with their own system design, this is something that definitely has legs. And again, our partners are asking for more coverage on that market, so that's something that we'll probably be presenting in the next month or two again, more in a robust format. The last spotlight is on the overall server market. So this is 2015. This is from a revenue perspective. So we just took our top vendors, which really make the lion's share of the market. You can see that Cisco, their B200, M3, and M4 were really the dominant factor for them. You can see HP, their DL380s and their DL360s, and their BL460s, so the rack mounts and blades are really dominant. And then if you go to monthly units, you can see that units were actually down. So that's something that, again, the market was compressed a little bit. That was basically due to companies putting back on capital expenditures, but that was also due to people over-binging on the sunsetting of Windows Server 2003. So, again, people were over-binging, and, they bought infrastructure at a cheaper price, so that was also an impact of the market for comparison, for year-over-year comparison. If we look at the actual the composition of our markets, when we talk about our distributor and our reseller panels, you can see that just commercial distributors represent the bulk of that, but you can see that commercial resellers are taking a little bit of share, but again, we expect it to kind of be we expect this to be about the same in the next 6 months to a year. If we look at the month over month from a unit perspective, you can see that HP actually dominates the market, and they have taken share from folks like Dell and HP from a unit perspective. Lenovo is in the market. They can be price aggressive, and HP is lowering their cost structure to be price aggressive too. So we expect a little bit of commoditization in the market as time goes on. I think as as Dell comes into the market, I think we're seeing more people kind of get aggressive. So again, that's something that we expect, a little bit of commoditization. So if you look at HP by line, you can see that the DL360s, the DL380s, and their DL460Cs really represent the bulk of their unit growth. So if you look at other rivals, you can see that HP is kind of consolidating this strategy a little bit, with fewer models. So again, if you look at Dell, for example, you can see that Dell has more models, it's more fragmented versus HP, which is kind of more centered on rack mounts and blades. And you can see Dell, their T20s, which are their mini towers, actually grew, which are typically going after the mid-sized to smaller businesses versus the larger businesses. So, we think that market might be impacted a tiny bit by companies moving to cloud. So, again, that's something that, we expect pressure on. And then if we look at Cisco, their server market, you can see that their B200, M4, and their M3 really dominate the market. So really their blades are really resonating with the market. And there was some share gain with Cisco during the quarter, and you could see that they actually lowered their ASPs to kind of blow out that inventory. So again, we see the B200 M4s will be gaining strength as those get flushed out. Again, in Lenovo, you can see their TS140s, the mini towers, those grew pretty well for them. So again, we see a lot. We think the major battles are really in rack mounts and blades. So we would expect more activity from Lenovo and Dell in that area, especially with the acquisition of EMC in the future as they kind of look at their product portfolios and decide, which ones are going to be, which one's going to have the server side, which one's going to have the storage side. So with that, just to recap a little bit, we talked about areas of growth, so areas such as information management. We talked about cybersecurity. We talked about pro audio video. We talked about the emergence of hyperconverged infrastructure. Again, that's going to grow at triple-digit growth rates. that's something that we expect to continue. We also expect areas of the software-defined data center to grow. We see SD-WAN coming into the market. We see applications such as application acceleration and WAN optimization as more companies adopt cloud computing from remote distances. Those packets need to be sped up to maintain application fidelity. So companies embracing cloud, those things need to be sped up. Companies that are embracing mobile workforces are giving them more latitude to work from home, and sharing desks in the office. We expect those access points to be installed. But that's pretty much it. So right now we'll go into a Q&A.
Yeah,
Mike, for Margarita. Teresa?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. This was very valuable. Can you just go one more slide? Just go to the next slide. We are actually going to skip. We are going to skip. That's perfect. Just leave it there. We are going to skip Q&A because we just got to the end of the 30 minutes. So we just wanted to thank Mike for being with us. Great information. And thank you again for everyone on the call for spending your valuable time with us. And just please reach out for questions at margaritakramer@npd.com. And just let us know if you would like to see a sample report. And with that, we just adjourn. And thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you for your time.